there is no God. There is no Allah. There is no nothing. When we die, we just food for the worms. That person may deny heaven and hell. That person may deny whatever. But there is one thing that they would not deny is the fact that death would come. And this is a concept that is as old as man. Preparing for death is not something that is common only with Muslims or believers. People all across the entire world prepare for death in some way. Quite often you find people who are old and elderly, or they are approaching their twilight years, they make preparations for cemetery plots. That I want to buy a plot of land right next to my wife, right overlooking the waterfall and overlooking the freeway or whatever. And somebody else makes us arrangements that when I die, I want all my property to go to my cat. And I'm writing it out in my will, so long as my cat is alive and her kittens continue to prosper, they will eat my millions and nobody else can touch my money, not even my own grandkids. You have people like this who prepare for death in their own way. The difference is that when it comes to the preparation of death, Muslims understand that our preparation does not end when a person dies. Rather, beyond death and dying, there is another life, and our preparation has to go beyond the point of actually dying. Other cultures, their preparation is right up until the time of death and dying. That when I'm dead, property has been purchased for me to be buried, coffin has been purchased, my will has been drawn up. That is right up until the time of dying. But what about beyond dying? What about being lowered inside the grave? What about being resurrected on the day of Qiyamah or judgment or whatever you want to call it? Well, as far as Muslims are concerned, preparation has to extend right up until you are secure in you going to heaven and you going in the right direction. You know, when it comes to the preparation of death, the average person does not prepare, or even if they do prepare, they would safely say that my preparation is inadequate. The famous Khalif Harun al-Rashid, rahmatullah alayh, a famous ruler of the Muslim lands and the patron of the arts and the patron of all types of services to the Muslim Ummah, when he was about to pass away, in fact just a little while before he was passed away, if I may retract, he used to have an individual that used to visit him in the court by the name of Bahlul. Bahlul was a person who was mentally challenged. He was not a lunatic, but he was not all there. He was a dime short of a dollar. And whenever he would come inside the court, he would make people laugh. He would crack stupid jokes. He would behave in an eccentric way. And he was like the jester of the court, the joker. One day, Harun Rashid rahmatullah alayhi told Bahlul that it seems that there is no bigger fool than yourself. Take the stick. Take the stick. So Bahlul says, stick? What should I do with the stick? Harun Rashid tells him that the day you find a bigger fool than yourself, a bigger joker than yourself, you go and you pass the stick on to him. And let's see if he finds a bigger joker than himself, and let us see how far the stick can go before the biggest joker of all, it lands up in his hand. So Bahlul says, okay, you playing with me, you joking with me, let me take the stick. Years later, Harun Rashid rahmatullah alayhi was assumed to be poisoned by one of his slaves. People started to visit him. This was the last moments of his life. And who showed up to visit him? Bahlul. So Bahlul comes inside the room with his hand behind his back. And Bahlul asks him that, Ya Khalifat al-Muslimin, O Khalif, O Caliph, O my leader, O Amir al-Mu'mineen, leader of the righteous, how are you feeling? So Harun Rashid says, well, it seems that the poison has reached my system and the doctors have given up hope, and it is, I'm about to breathe my last and I'm on my final legs. So Bahlul asked him that, oh my leader, what preparation have you made for your passing, for your death? Harun Rashid responds in an honest way, like how all of us in this room would respond. Well, it seems that I have not made adequate preparation, which is honest and which how a Muslim and a believer should respond. That I have not made sufficient preparation. Bahlul takes the stick out from behind his back and he says, you, the great Khalif, the great Harun Rashid, to go from one town to another town, months of preparation had to be made. The security had to be right. Cooks weeks in advance had to be busy in their kitchens preparing things that you will just have a small bite of or may not even, desire to put inside your mouth, and other people will eat. Months of preparations had to be made for you to go from one city to another city, and you're telling me your move from one world to another world and you have made not enough preparations. Take the stick. It seems that I have found a bigger joker than myself. It seems that I have found a bigger jester than myself. Harun Rashid takes the stick and he says, Bahlul, if ever you spoke the truth, you spoke the truth today. That there is no joker bigger than myself. There is no jester bigger than myself. And all of us, when our time comes, then we will realize that what big jokers and what big jesters we have been, and what a big joke life itself was. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that kullu nafsin dha'iqatul maut, that every soul will taste of death and taste of passing. Our actual topic of today is not necessarily regarding death and its concept or where a person will end up in heaven or hell. Rather, as is my trademark, I normally prefer to focus on particular events. That the event of death, when a person is born, right up until old age, beyond dying, heaven and hell, speaks volumes all by itself. But the topic of today is one particular leg of that journey, known as the sakarat or the ghamarat, referring to, in the English equivalent would be, the pangs and the pains of death. That what happens to a person in Muslim belief and what the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam has informed us, that a righteous person or an irrighteous person, an irregular person, undergoes at the time of the extraction of their soul. First of all, the Almighty says, وَجَاءَتْ سَكْرَةُ الْمَوْتِ بِالْحَقِّ, that the pangs of death will come to everybody, and that is true. It even happened to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that when he was about to breathe his last, and the pangs of death had already become visible on his body and his face, he was taken to the house of Aisha radiallahu anha, wherein he spent his last few moments. Aisha radiallahu anha says that قُبِضَ Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam bayna hahuna wa hahuna, that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, his soul was extracted while his head was on my bosom, between this part of her body referred to her chin and her lower bosom area. While his head was there on my chest, was his soul extracted. And when he started to feel feverish, he requested me to put a bowl of water close to him. He would dip his fingers inside that bowl and rub it on his brow and on his face. And he would mention these words, Inna lil mawti sakarat, Inna lil mawti ghamarat, that for death are pains that you can never ever experience or never describe. There are certain events and certain things in life that only a person who actually undergoes it can describe it. No book can do justice to it. No movie or film can do justice to it. No poem can do justice to it. You know, like on this point, discussing this point of certain life experiences, that you actually have to experience it to know what it is all about. A young girl rather a newly wedded girl, expectant with her first child, when she came home to her mother's home to give birth to her child, and as you know, in those days, there were no hospitals, you actually give birth at home. And that is how most of the world used to run. A midwife would come in the middle of the night, and that's where your baby would be born. And that's how that system suited the world for many, many generations, and even in most parts of the world, that's how it is. So the young girl tells her mom that, you know, when it is time for me to give birth, wake me up so that I know and I can see my baby's face. The mother tells her that when it is your time to give birth, you will be waking up the whole neighborhood, leave alone anybody needing you or to wake you up at that time. You will be waking up the whole town. That is how it is, and that is how it was. So describing and telling her that experience, don't think you're going to miss anything. Don't think that it's going to fall by you and you will not be able to figure out what happened to you. Just like that. That is what the Messenger ﷺ was meant by saying that inna lil mawti ghamarat, inna lil mawti sakarat. So he would take his fingers and he would rub it on his brow, wetting it so that that perspiration would mix with that cool water and that would lower his temperature. In fact, Aisha radiallahu anha says that as the hours drew closer to his passing, he requested that I read قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ and قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ. Remember that lesson of the Ma'awwadhatayn that we discussed at the time of sihr and witchcraft a couple of lessons ago. He said that he requested that I recite those two surahs and blow on me. Aisha radiallahu anha says that because he was too weak, I recited those surahs, I blew in his own palms and I used his own palms to rub on his own body because his palms were far better than my palms. So I thought as long as I can take some benefit from his blessed hands, I would do so. Finally, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam recites his kalima, points to the sky, and he says, Ila rafiqil a'la, to the high Lord, to the Lord above. And he passes away and his soul is now extracted from his body. Aisha radiallahu anha says that never ever did I pity the passing of anybody when and until I saw the passing of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, realizing that that is not an easy experience. The scholars say that the reason why it was difficult upon him was primarily for two reasons. One is because that experience, when it is borne patiently by a believer, serves as a medium to raise the rank of that believer, number one. And number two, generally, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the Almighty tests those that are most beloved to Him more in this world than He tests anybody else. This does not mean that a person will not undergo that experience of passing away. One may say that, you know, a person who dies because of electrocution, or his head is knocked off his block, or he dies almost instantly, what pain does that person experience? The reality is that when a person is about to pass away, he is no longer in the time zone of this world. He now enters the time zone or the realm of the hereafter. And the proof of that is the Quran. That when Pharaoh, was about to die and he was about to drown, he started to see the angels coming to take his soul away from him. At that point, He said that I believe in Moses and the faith of Moses, and I believe in Aaron, the brother of Moses, and I believe in everything that I was supposed to believe in. The Almighty responds to him and says, Al-an, now you want to believe, when we've been telling you all this time, we've been telling you all this time to believe, you refuse to believe, we've been telling you for so many decades, believe, and now, when you begin to see reality, you want to believe Al-an now? What happened to you all this time? Like some people, they just don't get the message immediately. When swine flu broke out, you find everybody scared of swine, scared of pigs. But we Muslims have been telling you for years, stay away from pigs. Now you go to all the airports of the world. They want to wear masks around their face. Don't you see our veiled woman? For years we've been telling you that that's how you need to walk around. You need to cover up and walk around. Only now you get the message. Firaun was such a character. Only at that time did he get the message when his sakarat and ghamarat started. That is the time that he now got the message. And all this time, he thought that when Musa was speaking to him, he was speaking to him in another language. He was speaking to him with meaningless conversation. Like sometimes, you hear meaningless conversation, and it just goes over the top of your head. Like when you're boarding a flight, the pilot says, outside it's minus 48 degrees Celsius, as if you were going to take a stroll on the wing right now, and excuse me, or the passenger next door says, well sir, where are you going to? Well, I'm going to actually the same place you are going to. Am I sitting in the ejector seat that I'm going to be shot off? And this seat is going somewhere else, and this seat here is going somewhere else. So all this while, Firaun thought that was meaningless conversation, until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him the ghamarat and the sakarat of maut, and that was it, and that was the final time. My respected friends, although the previous scriptures speak a little bit about the passing, because of our relationship with the sunnah, the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam in particular has spoken volumes about the passing person and the person who is about to leave this world. By the way, that individual who is about to pass away is known in terminology as the muhtadar. Is known as the muhtadar. The muhtadar. See the word muhtadar. Whoever can read this, that's good. Whoever can read this here, that's good. The muhtadar is from the word hadara, to be present. He is referred to as the muhtadar because of the presence of the passing with him or her right now. Muhtadar for male, muhtadara for a female. This muhtadar individual, first and foremost from a practical lesson point of view, what are Muslims supposed to do when they come across an individual member of the family or somebody they know or don't know that's about to pass away? The first thing that you should do is make an attempt to try and put that person to rest in the direction of the Qibla by putting the feet and chest in line with the Qibla. If that person is horizontal, then you may put a pillow or two under the neck and head of that person, but in a comfortable way without causing any discomfort, so that the front part of the body, either directly upright or slightly elevated from a horizontal position, is in the direction of the Qibla, and it is in that way. This is subject to possibility. If it is not possible and uncomfortable, or the hospital room or the ICU cannot be rearranged, then you leave it as it is right now. This is under normal circumstances if you could do so. Secondly, the instruction of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the performance of the talqeen on that individual. The talqeen is not a demand that you make on the dying person that read your kalima. Read your kalima right now. Say your La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, and then all is good. The talqeen is a repetition of the kalima in such a way that a person is encouraged to recite. You know, like the perfect example of that is the labbaik. If you go for Hajj, or you hear like 1,000 people going for Hajj, even though your mood may not be there to say your labbaik, somehow it becomes so catchy that becomes your choice of dhikr, your choice of mention, your repeated word, right up until the end of your experience. There are things like that in the world, good and bad. The talqeen refers to such a method of the pronunciation of the kalima that person is encouraged to recite, even though you don't directly order that person that say your final statement. That La ilaha illallah, as most people here should know, it means that there is no one worthy of worship except Allah, and Muhammad, the messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is the messenger of the Almighty. Whoever recites this statement and passes away, the messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, dakhala al-jannah, that person will enter Jannah by lieu of a person reciting it, in the hope that a previous sin or the life of sins are washed away of that person. Then we are also encouraged to recite Suratul Yasin in the narrations of Ibn Majah, Abu Dawood, those two particular narrations. The Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam directly says that when a person is about to pass away, ease the pangs of death on that person via your recitation of Surah Yasin. And that particular surah should be recited at that time by at least one individual. Regarding the sakarat and what that person is undergoing, in the Musnad of Imam Ahmad, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Messenger of Islam, says that when a believer is about to leave this world, angels with faces bright like the sun, they come to the bedroom of that person. That person, bedroom or wherever that person is passing away. Now, as we said before, what if that person's death is instantaneous and immediate? Well, to you it may seem instant, but to that person it may seem like a lifetime. To you it may seem that that person was electrocuted and just went like in 1 second, or was blown up like in a split second. But to you, it seems like that, but to that person who's passing away, who enters the zone of the time zone of the hereafter, it is an extended experience wherein that person will experience something. For a believer, though it is difficult, but there are aspects of it, especially towards the end, that are actually pleasant for that believer. That when that person is right at the end of the throes of his life, the believer, the angels throng in the room of that person to the extent that they cover up the end of that room, as if you cannot see the end of that crowd. The angel of death then comes to that person with a water skin bag. That water skin bag represents a covering of a shroud of Jannah. The soul and the life of that person is extracted in such a way as if a bottle has sprung a leak. When a bottle springs a leak, the water doesn't just gush out, and you only notice that small leak much more later. The water eases out of that utensil until you look inside, and where did my water go? That is how the soul of a righteous individual is taken out, like a bottle that has sprung a leak and the liquid is slowly coming out, to the extent that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that just consider yourself to be a bottle, consider yourself to be a jug of milk, or whatever you want to consider yourself to be. The soul is first extracted from the feet. It works its way up to the waist and then to the chest. And the final place that it leaves the body is through the eyes. And it is for this reason that when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam went to witness the passing of a companion by the name of Abu Salama radiallahu anhu, he went to the deceased individual, the body, and he closed the eyes, the eyelids. And he mentioned that in the ruh, that the ruh, the soul, when it extracts or it comes out of the body of a person, yashuqqul basar, it comes out or splits through the eyeballs. And that is where it comes out. That is where it extracts itself, or that's its exit. Therefore, close the eyelids as soon as somebody has passed away and somebody has gone, left this world. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also speaks about the process of extraction. حَتَّى إِذَا بَلَغَتِ الْحُلْقُومِ, that when the soul of a person reaches the throat, and that is a point wherein a person realizes that it's not going to go back. It is at that point, حَتَّى إِذَا بَلَغَتِ الْحُلْقُومِ, in Surah Waqiyah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about that when the soul reaches the Adam's apple or the throat, then everybody comes to the conclusion that this person is about to pass away. When that soul is extracted, the angel of death, who is there in attendance, the angel of death, by the way, can either refer to one single angel in charge of the extraction of the soul of the people internationally, or it could refer to a group of angels. Now, in the event that it is one single angel, that's not too difficult to understand. In time zones of the Akhirah, wherein all these angels operate, 5 minutes of this world could be like 5 hours. 0.5 of a second could be like 5 minutes and 10 minutes. We don't know exactly. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. But this angel of death receives the soul, wraps the soul in a shroud of Jannah, goes to the first sky, knocks on the door. The angels ask, or in attendance ask, that who are you transporting with you? And the angel of death gives the identity of that person as so and so, the son or the daughter of so and so, naming this person in the best names that this person used to use in the hereafter. Not calling him shoddy, not calling him stinky, not calling him anything of the sort, but referring to the best names that he was referred to in the hereafter, until that soul is transported to the arsh of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at this point requests the identity, although He knows, but for the purposes of announcement, mentions that what is the identity of this individual and who is this soul. When the identity is disclosed, the soul is now returned back to the grave or wherever that soul is now meeting its final resting place. At this point, that is when the Munkar and Nakir show up. Those three angels that are in charge of asking every single soul that dies three very pertinent and important questions. You get all three, you okay. You lose one, you lose all. The first question, Man Rabbuk, that who is your Rabb? And the answer, of course, will be Allah. The second question, Ma Dinuk, what is your deen? And the third question, a person will be shown that surah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, wherein that person will have to identify that this is the messenger of Allah, and provided that person led a righteous life, that person will be successful. When that person is successful, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will now command the angels in attendance to make an announcement. Nam, nawmat al-urus, la yuqidhuha illa ahabbu ahliha. That sleep, the sleep of a bride, nobody will awake that bride or wake up that bride except the most beloved member of her family right now, at this point in time, which is her husband. Maybe later he may become the most hated part of her family, but right now the most beloved part of her family. The scholars mention at this point very candidly, What is meant by sleep, the sleep of a bride? Everybody knows a bride doesn't sleep and neither does a groom sleep. What is meant by the sleep of a bride or the sleep of a newly wedded person? What is meant by that is contentment and peace. How a person who is in a position of security, like somebody who has just been recently wedded, is in the security of matrimony and under the contentment of matrimony, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given me a partner and I am at the pinnacle or the climax of joy in my life and fulfillment in my life. That is what is meant, that sleep, the sleep of a newly wedded person. Whereas on the other hand, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the same narration speaks of a person who is a wretched soul, wherein the angels come to that person in such a shape that the angel of death, if him coming to that person who is a wretched individual, just the sight of that angel is enough adab and punishment for that person. He won't need no Jahannam. He won't need no anything else. Just the sight is good enough. You know, people think that we have seen it all. We have seen the scariest movies back from those days when Freddy was still popular. We have seen the Chainsaw Massacre. We have seen Blair Witch Hunt. We didn't even, we didn't blink an eyelid through all those crazy movies. Everybody else was trying to squint, and everybody else was making excuses to go and get soda in the kitchen when you come to the scary part. But not me. Not me. I was there right from the start, right through the commercials and right till the credits. I didn't even blink a single eyelid. I was like stoned in front of the screen because I didn't feel anything. Well, nothing in this dunya, nothing in this world, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentions, that can compare to the sight of the angel of death at the time of a wretched person passing, to the extent that that person needs no adab and needs no punishment upon that day. You know, like how we say that a face only a mother could love. The angel of death has no mother, neither do any of the angels have any mom. No dad, no mom. They created in a special way by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This individual that is passing and this individual that dies, this wretched individual, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam describes the extraction of the ruh and the soul of that person. Remember the simile before, a bottle that sprung a leak. Look at the simile now. What Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, that the simile is that you have a bale of cotton wool that has been wetted through and through. And right in the middle of that cotton wool are skewers, like how you put a barbecue or a Sikh kebab skewer. It has all those skewers coming out at different directions and hooks, that the whole thing goes on the grill. Those skewers are inside that bale of cotton wool. Try and extract that bale or that skewer out of that wet bale of cotton wool. It doesn't come out easy. It comes out with ripping, it comes out with shredding until your whole bale will collapse. That is the description in the Musnad Imam Ahmad of the sakarat of an individual that is wretched and impious. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save us all. And then the angel of death wraps up that soul in a foul smelling cloth of Jahannam. When that person is taken up to the first sky, he is introduced in the most evil and wretched names that he was referred to in this world. For people may have been calling him Your Highness in this world. People may have been calling him His Majesty in this world. But that does not necessarily mean that that was his name in usage. For we do not just share this world with insan and human beings. There are malaika in attendance who also address us from time to time. We have got angels on either side of our shoulders that record our names and record our actions on practically every single new slate and page that they start. How they used to refer to that person in a wicked way because of wicked behavior, that is how that person will be referred to on the first sky until that person will be returned back to the qabr and back to the grave. At that point, when they are returned back to the grave, the Munkar and Nakir, those two angels will show up. And of course, that person will not know the answer. When asked, who is your Rabb? The response will be, Ha ha la adri. That, oh, I do not know. What is your deen? I do not know. Who is this individual? I do not know. The angels of that in the hadith, or the angels Munkar and Nakir in the hadith in Muslim, will now take hammers made out of steel and beat that person, telling him, Ma qara'ta, ma darayta, that you did not read in this worldly life. You did not know in this worldly life. Today you will see. At this point in time, that person, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens up a window from Jahannam, and he continues to experience the breeze, or rather the air, the hot air. Breeze is a descriptive word for this particular event. The air and the wind coming out of the furnace of Jahannam right up until the end of time. So here Rasulullah ﷺ describes the sakarat and how its process is for those who are good and for those who are bad. There are certain individuals that Rasulullah ﷺ also came across, that the sakarat was particularly difficult because of events and actions that they did in the worldly life. In the narration of Ibn Majah, a young man was about to pass away. His soul was just not coming out. And people were trying to comfort him. People were trying to help him out. Nothing was happening. And it was like suffering that was carrying on and on until Rasulullah ﷺ came in attendance and mentioned that this person is undergoing the pangs and the pains of death to a higher elevated stage because of his disobedience to his mother in this world. Call his mother. The mother came, and while the mother was still at the door, the messenger tells the mother, forgive your son. You don't forgive him, he's going to carry on like this for who knows how long. You forgive him, it will be much more easier upon him. The mother says, there is no way I can forgive my son for the crime that he did and what he did to me. So then Rasulullah said, okay, if that's the case, might as well we get a bunch of firewood and light a fire and throw him inside. It'll probably be better for him throwing him inside than letting him see the way he goes or what's happening to him right now. Then the mother comes to her senses. Not that Rasulullah was going to do it in any way. He's just giving her a scenario so that she will come back down to earth, and she will now at least let bygones be bygones at this point in the life of her son. So the mother says, okay, don't do it, I forgive him. As soon as she says that, his soul comes out of his body with his kalima, and Rasulullah mentioned to the audience that there are certain actions that people do, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the final hour uses those actions either to make life easy for them or to make life difficult for them. It goes both ways and it cuts both ways. And in fact, on one occasion, it was brought to my attention that a certain person was an improper individual, irrighteous in the eyes of people. But that individual, no matter what were his bad ways and what were his wicked ways, he had one good deed to his credit. That he found a child, this was not very long ago, this is still back in Africa when I was living there. He found a child that was abandoned by her mother. The child was abandoned in a park. Now in those days, in that part of the world, there's no use showing up by the fire department and I got a baby. And the fireman was, okay, I'll take the baby off your hands, and that's the end of call county or call child welfare. You know what, either the village takes care of the child, or they have to send the child to a big city in the orphanage or something. It's not like how it is here, obviously. He picked up that child. Mother has abandoned that child. That's an infant of a few hours old. And that he was, of course, Asian origin, Asian as in Asian Indian origin, and the child was African origin. And in that part of the world, the Asians or the Indians are known as the traders, and the African individuals are normally the farm workers or the laborers, or that's how it is in the colonious, parts of the world. He picks up that baby, raises that baby as his own, gives her the kalima. Of course, raising up as a Muslim child inside a household, he may be whatever in his personal life, but at least as a Muslim he knows that there are certain things that are as part of raising a child. That child was part of the household with his own children. When that child was now of age, got her married to a decent man, when that man was about to pass away, he died in an accident, as he was being taken out of his car with the jaws of life, from that time right up until the hospital, the only thing that he could recite was La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. People asked him his name, not giving his name, your address, can we call your wife, can we do this? Only La ilaha illallah from the time that person passes away, from the time of that accident, right till the passing of eventually they'll know who he is. They'll look in his car, they'll look in his registration, but at that time you only want to recite La ilaha illallah and nothing else. Why? Because of righteous deeds. Now of course nobody knows for sure whether it is that righteous deed or other things, only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. But what we know very well is that the actions of people, good and bad, will have an impact on that person, especially at the time of the sakarat and the passing of that individual. Coming back to the more practical lessons of today, that when a person is about to pass away, and should they be in a frame of mind, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned that the dua that you recite at that time is Allahumma a'inni ala sakaratil maut wa ghamaratil maut. Allahumma a'inni ala sakaratil maut wa ghamaratil maut. That, oh Allah, assist me upon the pangs and pains of death. At that point in time, you only remember Allah, and more important than that individual are the people around him. More important than that person are the people around him and the environment wherein a person is passing away. It was also for this reason that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would make a dua that Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-maut al-faj'a, that I seek protection in you from a sudden death. That you die so suddenly that you didn't have a time to do anything. You didn't have a time for repentance. You didn't have a time for kalima. You didn't have a time to do anything righteous. So that at that point in time, you would be recorded, as having done something righteous. It does not mean that those who passed away because of a sudden death or in a sudden death, they are improper in any way. Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Almighty, knows. But this was a dua that the messenger would make so that this ummah can understand that in addition to you making preparation for the hereafter, the method and how you die, dying in such an environment that is conducive to your kalima and your tawbah, is as important as you receiving forgiveness in the hereafter, for it represents an all-important step. It represents an all-important catapult into what is going to be positive in the hereafter. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all tawfiq, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all such a passing that it is easy upon our soul, and at the same time it is one in an environment of righteousness wherein we are not called to pay for a life of sins before. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy on the entire ummah. My respected friends, this is the final class for this particular time. And just to do a brief recap, in particular for this last 4 classes that we did, we discussed such topics that are very rarely discussed. Normally from our Jum'ah khutbahs or whatever advices or lectures that we hear, it is regarding proactive approaches to our present condition right now, who we need to vote for the good of the Muslims, what we need to do for this part of the world and that part of the world, and that is all good. That is all required, that is all good. Don't ever forget that we are living in this world first, and then the akhirah is here, in the hereafter. And of course, indeed, that is a requirement. But at the same time, it should not take us away from reality. This is reality. This is real. This passing is real. And it would be futile that if a person made effort for all the good of the world and for the good of mankind, but failed to make an active and a proactive effort in securing their forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It would be an action in futility. So there's a balance. There is a balance between the activism of a person and the spirituality of a person. These four topics, whilst they have got elements of activity and activism inside there, they are more geared towards the spiritual individual, whether it was the topic on sihr, whether it was the last week's topic, whether it was this week's topic, the topic of passing. It represents all important lessons that we need to know. They are lessons because a lot of them are practical events. Either you yourself or somebody else in the near future or somebody around you is going to be, or you are going to be around such individuals that are going to be be in a position to leave this world and about to pass away. At that time, you cannot be stuck for words and actions. At that time, you need to be active and you need to be vigilant at what you need to do right now. And this lesson covered events that you need to do right now, and for you to get an understanding of what that moment is all about, so that adequate preparation can be made and adequate comfort can be issued to a person who is in that position. And if a person is in that position and they themselves, are saying things that they should not be saying, well, at least you will have an understanding of the mindset or the condition of that individual and that person right now. This, what I mentioned in this 1 hour gig or whatever I'm here, how long I'm standing up here for this last 45-50 minutes, is regarding a bigger or a greater class that I actually teach. That is the Janaza workshop. Anybody was here for that? Some familiar faces, yes. Ready and made for that? The Janaza workshop, which I actually teach on a regular basis, which actually covers the rights of a sick person right up until the burial and the ghusl and the washing of a male and the washing of a female and the placing of the kafan, which is those shrouds and the sheets of cloth, on the male and the female. So the next time I teach it, inshallah, do pay a visit if you are close by in that area, and you definitely will, inshallah, benefit from it. I think I'm teaching it on Sunday next. But anyway, I don't advertise my activities. You can just check up www.riyadululum.com or .org, and then you'll find out, exactly what's happening. But this is part of it. And many people ask the Sheikh, Janaza ghusl starts when a person is dead. Why are you taking it an hour before or a few hours before and speaking about the muhtadar? Well, the reality is that it starts from there. And the only time that it dawned on me that you actually have to discuss it from there is before, when I used to teach the class, I used to start from the actual ghusl, janaza, burial, that's there. And not extend it to the muhtadar. The only time I started extending it to the muhtadar is at the time of the Haitian earthquake. That when many of the students studying in the other Caribbean islands and Dominican Republic, when they made their way to Haiti to help out in the makeshift camps, now of course those Muslim students, they helped out with people who were about to pass away, about to die and succumb to their wounds. Many of those people accepted Islam before passing away. They were not there as doctors or nurses or student doctors. They were there as du'at and da'is and callers also. And that is an ultimate service. That you don't just patch up somebody's wounds, but you also take an opportunity to discuss about Allah and the hereafter to them. And if that person recites the Shahada at that time, well, not only will you be rewarded for a physical service that you are giving that person, but you have got that person on your side on the day of Qiyamah, that person was saved from the nar and the fire because of your efforts. Many of these people who did pass away and eventually succumbed to their injuries because their amputations would not heal, or they were just too badly, injured in the earthquake. Well, many of them were the muhtadar individuals. Whilst many of these kids knew what to do with the body, and they could look in the certain books and kitabs or online, okay, this is how we're going to shroud them, and this is how we're going to wrap them. Very few people are familiar and know that the actual process starts before the person passes away, that the talqeen is given, and if that person is in a position, recites this dua, and this is how a person passes away until they brought it to our attention. Of course, that time, by the time that was done, that was probably too late to effect that particular situation. But it dawned as a reality that the discussion does not start when a person passes away, but it starts well in advance. So this could be a holistic approach from the time a person is sick right up until the time you visit the grave, and what you're supposed to do and pay your final respects to the deceased person. Jazakumullah khairan for being the best audience, and inshallah we will meet soon. Any questions? There comes here. No hands? No hands. I do not want to see your palms or any other elevated parts of your anatomy. All questions come from it.
Is there a dua that we can recite every day to make our passing easy?
The dua that a person should recite every day and has been reported that will make the passing of oneself easy is the continuous recitation of Ayatul Kursi after every salah. This particular practice has been recommended to having ease or will ease, inshallah, the passing of an individual. So that is one recommended practice that is established from the Sunnah, that should a person do so, the soul will become easy. Another practice that may not necessarily be something that you recite, but it is a physical practice, the use of the siwak. The use of the miswak, the use of the siwak has been narrated in the authority of Bazar rahmatullahi alayhi, that people who practice the siwak, it is a mark of their passing that their soul is extracted more easy. The siwak is what is known as the miswak, that twig or that stick that people use to clean their teeth, and in fact is the sunnah of prayer that you need to use it before you say your prayer. That practice has been known to make the passing of a person easy. Also sadaqah. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned, inna sadaqata, that certainly charity, tadfa'u ghadab ar-rabb, it expels the anger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, wa tamna'u mitat as-su, aw kama qala alayhi salatu wa salam, and it prohibits and prevents a person from dying in a difficult way. Charity that is given regularly. That charity does not have to be tons of cash, but then $1 or 50 cents or a quarter that you give every day, and which has been observed by many of our elders that every day they would give something. This sadaqah is a very important protection from passing away in a difficult way. So these three things that we could do on a regular basis. Next question.
At what time does the door of Tawbah close?
The door of Tawbah closes when a person starts to see the angels coming to take his ruh and his soul. Exactly what time that will be, well, nobody actually came back from that experience to tell us that when our soul was round about our knees, that is when the angels showed up. Or when our soul was by our toes, that is when when it happened. But it is safe to say that when a person now starts to see the unseen, that is a time when in the doors of Tawbah, the doors of Kalima, and those such things which are pertaining to the hereafter are closed for that person.
And then another question, more of a clarification. Does the soul come out of the eyes when they're passing away?
The soul actually is extracted from every single cell and fiber of the body. Our belief, and I think we did discuss this here at the time of the ruh and the soul, that the soul inside the body of a person is not necessarily concentrated just in the heart or just in the mind or just in the belly area. It actually spreads to every single fiber of your body. And at the time of passing, it's sort of like pooled and sucked, like a suction or a magnet that is drawing iron filings from everywhere. And it is sucked to a central area, and from that central area of the chest, it goes to the throat, the final exit point. So it's not necessarily, concentrated in the eyes, but the final exit point, the point of departure of that soul will be the eyes.
Is there any type of law that you can commit for a Muslim who may have committed suicide? In this specific case, it's unsure if mental illness was involved.
When a Muslim commits suicide, when anybody commits suicide, one thing is the act of suicide being condemned, but our relationship to that person should be the burial of any regular Muslim. And our relationship to that person should be like how you would make dua for a person and dua maghfirah for that person. You should do that for a person or a person who committed suicide as well. So regarding that person who committed suicide, you should pray for the soul of that person. Give charity on behalf of that person. Do as much as you can, as you would do for any parent or any sibling, and you should think the best of that person. You should never ever speak of the action of that person, even though you know it's a fact, but speaking of that action just serves to relive painful memories. Some scholars have mentioned that if a person commits suicide, the appointed imams or the leaders of the community, they should not be at his janazah prayer. The purpose of that is not to consider him to be lower, but if they show up at his janazah prayer, then it will bring the spotlight on that occasion, that the main guys are showing up, so the crowd shows up with them. It gets out there, and when it gets out there, people want to know what happened to that person. So the reason of why the people of authority should not show up is to make this as hush-hush as possible, and so that all those people who thrive on, curiosity, and all those people who thrive on news and snitching and stuff, they don't get the opportunity to find out and ask, how did this person die? At the time of somebody passing away, you get some characters who show up, how did they die? And when nobody wants to tell them, they'll go to somebody else. How did the person die? What did he do? Did he slash his wrists? Did he OD? What happened to that person? Oh, where's his wife? Where's this? At that time, you're supposed to be praying for the person, not inquiring how the person left this world. Is that going to bring the person back in any way? No. Nothing is going to bring that person back. But just so that all these individuals are hushed, it should not be brought in the limelight that this person committed suicide. But your treatment and attitude towards that victim should be like any other Muslim, giving charity and praying for the forgiveness of that person. Inevitably, every Muslim will be forgiven, and if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to forgive that person, well, there's no barrier between him and Allah, and we don't know what was the mental position of that individual. That person who's relieved of their senses, while they are not even considered as accountable for their actions because they were relieved of their senses, they will be forgiven by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala straight away.
You mentioned this a little bit when you said a wretched person, when they're in the grave, the soul, the window is open to Jahannam. What are hardships and pains that we may go through in the grave of the day?
Regarding the grave and what happens inside the grave, I'm going to be very brief. Some hardships that have been mentioned by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the squeezing of the grave. And this has been numerously mentioned. The squeezing of the grave occurs that when a wretched person is placed inside, and the grave squeezes to the extent that the ribs of one side penetrate into the ribs of the other. And then it now expands itself once again, and then it now brings itself once again, sort of like a continuous process of punishment. It's also mentioned that a tarikus salah, a person who leaves salah, at the appointed waqt and hour of salah, an angel, or rather a serpent, is commissioned to enter inside that grave and torment that person right up until the salah time ends. It disappears, it goes away and comes back at the other waqt and the next time of salah, in lieu of that person not praying their salah on their waqt and on their time. There are of course many mentions of the adab of the qabr, and inshallah these are just a few. We will discuss it inshallah maybe at the next campfire. These are all campfire topics, folks. Dajjal, adab al-qabr, although it doesn't make it any less scary and informative having it in a classroom setting. But then, if we're going to give you all the info right now, well, what's left for the campfire?
If a believer gets all 3 questions right, does he or she still get a punishment in the grave?
It is assumed, inshallah, that once you get those 3 questions right, you are okay in the grave. But it is no guarantee that you will be okay upstairs. For other people may level cases against you upstairs that you are unaware of and will have to be sought out in one way or the other when you go, on the Yawm al-Qiyamah. But it is assumed that these 3 questions would at least guarantee you some sleep inside the grave. Wallahu alam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best.